In the past few weeks, 7 women in Iran were murdered by their relatives in different cities including Kermanshah, Shushtar, Asadabad, Burujerd, Maraghe, Piranshah, and Islamabad Gharb. Piranshah, Kani Abdullahi, a 17-year-old girl, was murdered by her father for talking on the phone with a boy. Islamabad Gharb, Sima Moradi, a 35-year-old woman, was murdered along with her 2 children by her husband, who fled the scene. His motive remains unclear. Maraghe, a 37-year-old woman, was killed by her husband, who later attempted to escape but was arrested. Burujerd, a man shot his wife dead during an argument and then killed himself. Asadabad, another young woman was murdered by her husband, but the motive is still unknown. Shushtar, Atefe Zoghaibi, a victim of child marriage, was shot 16 times by her father and brother while holding her baby. Kermanshah, Golnaz, a 27-year-old pregnant woman, was murdered along with her 8-month-old onboard baby by her husband's relatives. After 21 days in a coma, she passed away. Several suspects have been arrested. These brutal murders highlight the deep-rooted culture of honor violence, patriarchal oppression, and the Iranian regime's failure to protect women. As long as discriminatory laws remain in place, women will continue to be the primary victims of this brutality. Since the beginning of this year, 3,714 cases of child abuse have been reported to the Social Emergency Services in Khorasan, a stark indication of the deepening social crisis and the Islamic Republic's inability to protect vulnerable children. Despite 8,141 emergency interventions and 6,000 crisis center admissions, these numbers expose the lack of effective planning, weak policy making, and systemic neglect of social harm. While billions of tomans are spent on propaganda and repression, resources for abused children remain minimal and insufficient. Mismanagement and misplaced governmental priorities have turned children into the primary victims of this incompetence. Ending this crisis requires serious change, something that will only be possible by removing an incapable system that cannot even protect its most vulnerable citizens. Atefe Zoghaibi, a 17-year-old mother of a newborn, was a victim of honor-related violence. She had run away from home 2 years ago to marry the man she loved, but after paying a dowry in accordance with tribal customs and having her marriage officially approved, she remained in danger. Finally, on the 29th of January 2025, her father and brother entered her home disguised as soldiers and shot her dead while she was holding her newborn baby. Atefe is a symbol of thousands of other women who lose their lives due to unequal laws, tribal prejudices, and lack of legal protections. Protecting women is one of the important duties of the government, which is the Islamic Republic of Iran not only undertakes, but also condones this violence by enacting unequal and discriminatory laws against women. Negar Dabbaghi, a teenager who was previously detained on charges of inciting people to commit crimes against domestic and foreign security, insulting Islamic sanctities, propaganda against the Islamic Republic, and defaming the founder and leader of the regime, has announced that her trial is scheduled for February 19th. Born in 2007, Negar Dabbaghi was released from Tabriz Central Prison on bail set at 400 million tomans. In a video she shared, she urged the people of Iran not to let her trial take place in silence. Asghar Sepehri, the brother of pro-monarchy political prisoners Fatemeh Sepehri and Mohammad Hossein Sepehri, wrote on his X account. The indictment hearing for Fatemeh Sepehri and Mohammad Hossein Sepehri was held on Monday, January 27, 2025 by Branch 905. They were charged with 2 offenses: insulting the supreme leader, propaganda against the regime. On December 26, my brother and sister issued a statement from Vakilabad prison in Mashhad addressing Ali Khamenei, which led to this judicial session. One of the sentences in their statement that enraged the regime was, "Ali Khamenei, your situation is now worse than Bashar al-Assad's was a month ago. You no longer have the power to suppress, nor the opportunity to deceive." During the hearing, the investigator told them they had insulted His Excellency in their statement and asked them to present their final defense. My sister responded, "I have neither a first defense nor a final one. My freedom will come with the overthrow of the Islamic Republic." The session was held online and my sister requested that the camera be turned on so she could see the investigator, but he refused. Many of those who interact with my brother and sister, whether in prison or court, are deeply afraid of revealing their names or faces. This fear clearly shows that they anticipate the imminent fall of the Islamic Republic and dread being held accountable for their actions. It appears that the prison phone in Vakilabad has been repaired, and my sister was finally able to contact our family. Sara Abbasi, the wife of Manucherh Bakhtiari, a monarchist political prisoner and the grieving father of the late Puya Bakhtiari, announced on Instagram that a new sentence has been issued against her husband, further increasing pressure on him. She stated that Manucherh Bakhtiari has been convicted of spreading false information online and sentenced to 13 months and 15 days in prison. Previously, he had been sentenced to 6 months for insulting the supreme leader. Ms. Abbasi emphasized that these charges are fabricated and that her husband is being targeted simply for speaking out about the authorities' neglect of his illness and their refusal to grant him medical leave. She also revealed that a new case has been opened against him in Branch 1 of the Qazvin Prosecutor's Office without official notification, accusing him of disturbing public opinion through a virtual court session. Addressing the judiciary, she wrote, "Why not just sentence him to life in prison instead of repeatedly giving him false hope of release while fabricating new charges against him?" The Court of Appeals has sentenced Mashallah Karami, the father of the executed protesters Mohammad Mehdi Karami, to 1 year in prison and the confiscation of his home and car. In this case, one other defendant received a 91-day prison sentence, 2 were fined 50 million tomans instead of serving time, and 7 others were acquitted of all charges. Ali Sharifzadeh Ardekani, Karami's lawyer, announced on Wednesday, January 29th that the appellate court in Karaj overturned his client's previous sentence of 8 years and 10 months in prison, confiscation of property, and a fine, reducing his sentence to 1 year in prison. Mr. Sharifzadeh noted that the Revolutionary Court's ruling on property confiscation still stands, but he expressed hope that the Supreme Court would accept a retrial and overturn the remaining 3 years and 7 months of imprisonment and property seizure. Amir Shahidi, the father of the late Mehshad Shahidi, one of the victims of Iran's nationwide uprising, expressed his frustration on X regarding the lack of progress in his son's case. "Until now, I have endured in silence, hoping that my son Mehshad Shahidi's murder case would be handled through legal channels. But it seems my patience was a mistake. Therefore, I find it necessary to share the following with my dear compatriots. The insistence of certain security officials in Iraq on obstructing the legal process, their attempts to derail the case, the illegal ruling of the judge in Branch 1 of Iraq's Public Prosecutor's Office declaring the case a security matter, and the refusal to grant my lawyer access to review the file have all crossed the line. However, these obstacles will not deter me from pursuing justice for my son's murder and the injustice we have suffered. If these actions continue, I will soon share the full truth with my fellow Iranians through this very platform. Patience has its limits. Akbar Hosseini, a former political prisoner and monarchist activist, was assaulted by agents of the Islamic Republic while visiting the grave of the late Hannan Kia. The assailants severely beat him before fleeing the scene. Hosseini was immediately taken to the hospital where he is currently receiving medical care. Mr. Hosseini had previously been arrested during his mandatory military service in the army for supporting the Iranian people and the families of victims seeking justice. Farmers of Khorasgan Square in Isfahan staged a sit-in, demanding the immediate release of a detained fellow farmer. The demonstrators expressed strong solidarity, emphasizing that their colleagues' imprisonment was unjust and highlighted deeper systemic issues faced by the agricultural community. These included government negligence towards their rights, persistent water shortages, unresolved land disputes, and inadequate support for sustainable farming practices. Their peaceful protest was not only a call for justice in this specific case, but also a broader plea to address the pressing challenges threatening their livelihoods. Through this gathering, they sought to amplify their voices and urge the authorities to recognize and act on the struggle of the farming community. Citizens of Iraq staged a protest against the burning of mazut at the Shazan power plant, which has caused severe air pollution in the city. The demonstrators expressed their frustration over the authorities' disregard for public health, pointing out the detrimental impact of mazut burning on air quality and the resulting health hazards for residents. They demanded an immediate cessation of this practice and urged the government to adopt cleaner energy alternatives to address the crisis. This protest highlights the growing concern among residents about environmental degradation and the lack of accountability from those in power, calling for sustainable and responsible measures to protect the health and well-being of their community. A group of retirees affiliated with the Social Security Organization gathered in Ahwaz to protest against ongoing economic hardships and the lack of action by authorities to address their long-standing demands. The demonstrators highlighted their struggles with rising living costs, insufficient pensions, and delays in fulfilling promises made by the government regarding welfare improvements. They expressed frustration over the gap between their fixed incomes and the escalating prices of basic necessities, calling for urgent measures to alleviate their economic pressures. This protest is part of a series of nationwide demonstrations by retirees seeking justice and adequate support in the face of persistent financial challenges. Retirees and pensioners of the Isfahan Steel Company organized a protest march, voicing their grievances over dire living conditions and demanding an increase in their pensions. The demonstrators highlighted the growing disparity between their stagnant incomes and the rising costs of essential goods and services, which have left many struggling to make ends meet. They criticized the lack of attention from officials regarding their repeated appeals for fair compensation and dignified living standards. The demonstrations reflect the broader frustration among retirees across the country who continue to call for immediate action to address their financial and welfare concerns. A group of retirees from the telecommunications sector in Kermanshah, Tehran, and Isfahan staged protest gatherings to voice their frustration over worsening economic conditions and the unfulfilled commitments of the Islamic Republic's officials. The protesters decried the government's failure to address their long-standing demands, including adjustments to their pensions in line with inflation and the rising cost of living. They expressed deep dissatisfaction with the authorities' repeated delays and disregard for their livelihood concerns, which have exacerbated their financial hardships.